Okay, so good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's exactly 10 a.m. now. So while we're waiting for some of our other speakers to join, we will just set the ball rolling. My name is Fortuny Hato. I'm an associate with the law firm of Udoduma and Belosake and a member of the Nigerian Bar Association Young Lawyers Forum Energy and Sustainability Committee. And the committee is essentially the arm of the NBA-YLF that starts with the responsibility of developing capacity amongst lawyers across the areas of energy and environmental law and sustainability and the likes. And as part of the committee's initiatives, we're involved in a lot of policy advocacy, capacity development, as well as regulatory engagement activities within the energy sector. And this webinar essentially is put together to, what I would refer to as to take a deep dive into Nigeria's developing mining sector and just essentially to give young lawyers a sense of what the regulatory framework, the prospects, as well as the challenges that are facing the industry at the moment and the opportunities that lie within the industry for both young lawyers and investors, as we may see some of them join us in the course of the presentation. So in terms of ground rules, just some participation instructions, I would kindly ask that you keep your microphones off, except you are speaking. Please kindly keep your microphones off throughout the course of the webinar, as well as your cameras. And if you have a question, you may do well to drop a comment in the chat box, and all questions will be addressed at the end of the webinar. Today, we have put together an array of highly eminent and experienced professionals within the mining sector, as you'll soon see when we introduce our speakers. So this session hopes to be a very engaging and insightful one. But before we get into introducing our speakers, I would like to call on the chairman of the NBA-YLF Energy and Sustainability Committee and the person of Fortune Toma, to do us the honors of some introduction and a welcome address.
Thank you so much, Fortune. So funny how we have two Fortunes who are running this session, and I should go straight ahead to say a big thank you to everybody who's here so far, from our speakers to our ardent listeners, young lawyers, very senior legal practitioners, who are here. I can see partners from law firms. I can see Wala Joseph and a number of other persons who are here. So this is to say thank you for coming to be part of this engagement. I'll quickly use the next 5 minutes or less to talk about what we were trying to do at the forum, and more particularly at my committee, at the committee which I chair, the committee that is powering this webinar today. So we are the NBA-YLF, Nigerian Bar Association Young Lawyers Forum, Energy and Sustainability Committee. And essentially, we exist to help the Young Lawyers Forum to drive all of its aspirations, its initiatives within the energy and sustainability ecosystems. We operate under 4 working groups: oil and gas, power, renewables, utilities, mining and extractives, and the final one is the environment, climate, and sustainability. And through these working groups, we try as much as possible to engage with the industry, to achieve the twin purpose of contributing, being a part of the ecosystem conversations and helping shape the future of Nigeria's energy and sustainability industry. And at the same time, we're also there to help build capacities, develop that talent pool that is very necessary to help drive and sustain this ecosystem in the long term. So we do this through engagements like these webinars, and several other physical and non-physical engagements. Notably, we have a number of projects that we are running. This webinar is one of them. It happens every month, and we rotate it around the 4 working groups. So we've done something on the oil and gas. Something last webinar for March was on Nigeria's electricity supply industry. Surely an interesting session we had there. This one is in the mining sector, and the next one we would look at environment, climate, and sustainability conversations. Then we'll come back to oil and gas again. We have some other initiatives that we've launched. We recently unveiled what we call sustainable energy propositions. There are a list of 17 advocacy points with which we are using to drive, all of the things that we believe are essential for the sustainability of the industry. So we have a number of those advocacies that are focused on youth participation in the industry. And like we always like to say, we're calling on organizations to help us drive our message, to also be a part of it, because a lot of the advocacies are required these organizations, both government and private sector led, even industry associations and media, to play their part in ensuring that, okay, you have youth involved in the ecosystem conversations, and also that you have an industry that is sustainable. So the 17 SEPs, like we like to abbreviate them, they're modeled after the SDGs. We've unveiled them, and we've been asking for organizations to come and support us, come and play their part in ensuring that, okay, we're achieving what we're achieving. We've also recently launched, in commemoration with the World Earth Day, we unveiled what we called Project 1000. The idea is that we want to plant 1,000 trees. We have a community of young lawyers spread across the country. We have over 100 branches. And as much as possible, we like to think of ourselves as being the Nigerian Bar Association as the bridge between, amongst all young professionals in the ecosystem across all disciplines. So we launched that project. Project is currently ongoing. We've gotten so many people participating in teams to plant several trees. We're targeting 1,000 trees. We have $1,000 in cumulative cash that we want to give out, to the top 3 performing teams who are able to plant the most number of trees. And we're very much open to partnering with organizations, law firms, industry associations, and all kinds of organizations to help us drive this ambition. So to that extent, I guess this is me extending that invitation to all organizations who are here to please reach out to us. Our numbers are there. Our email is there. And we want to work with you. Think of us as a conduit pipe through which you can achieve or support sustainability aspirations that your organization may have. Your organization should have. So in summary, as the Young Lawyers Forum, particularly my committee, we're driving a lot of initiatives. And we're also saying that there's a lot more that needs to be done to ensure that there is a talent pipeline that can actually take over the industry. It starts from knowledge conversations, thought leadership sessions, putting out informationals. The last thing I forgot to mention, we'll be releasing our energy and sustainability bulletin very soon. It's going to be power packed. We're just asking organizations to please come and support us. We want it to have as much reach as possible. It's also one of the efforts at ensuring that there's a resource document, a resource material that we can use to help share knowledge, distribute knowledge, and also make as much impact. So I'll leave it at that. I bring greetings from Nigerian Bar Association, led by Mazia from Musigwe, and the Governing Council of the Young Lawyers Forum, led by Timothy Clement. I would pass over the baton to Fortune. Once again, thank you to our 4 speakers, Loale Ososami, Jumoke Fajem Rokun, Oyetala Oshobi SAN, and the distinguished Fola Fagbole. Fortune, the baton is handed over to you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would say that was a very clear introduction of what the ideals and the agenda of the committee is. So I will very quickly go into introducing the speakers that we have with us today. Please, Mr. Chairman, I would like if you could confirm that you can hear me clearly, because there was a bit of an interruption. Okay, thank you very much. So today we have with us, like I said, like I hinted earlier, a very robust panel. We have carefully selected some of the most notable, experienced professionals within the sector, and you can imagine how much of an effort that took. So I would just first of all say thank you to all of our distinguished speakers who took out time from their expectedly busy schedule to be with us here today. Unfortunately, we were supposed to have Mr. Oyetola Oshobi, Learned Senior Advocate of Nigeria, on this panel, but due to some pressing developments, he's unable to join us today. But I would assure you that he has left us in the able hands of someone who's also very highly experienced in the industry, in the person of Mr. Kehinde Daodu. And Mr. Kehinde Daodu is a partner in the law firm of Babalaki & Co., and he's in charge of the firm's mining and extractives practice group. Mr. Daodu started his career with a brief stint as a legal officer in one of Nigeria's leading banks before joining Babalaki & Co. as an associate in 2006. And he brings to this webinar his wealth of experience in project finance, banking, securities, mining and extractives, regulatory, compliance, etc. And he has also pivoted and gained over 10 years of experience working and handling diverse matters across the mining and metals industry. Thank you very much, Mr. Daudu, for joining us today. We also have on this panel Mrs. Lolade Oshosami, who is a partner at Dodo Mambello Sagie, where she leads the firm's mining and metals as well as tax practice groups. And Mrs. Oshosami advises on mining license acquisitions, exploration, and development of key minerals such as lithium, gold, iron ore, cobalt. And she also contributes to the Mining in Africa legal database. And trust me, she has, in fact, played a very significant role in the development of Nigeria's fiscal policy around the extractive sector. And as a matter of fact, she was part of, the legislative syndicate for the petroleum industry reforms in Nigeria. She also serves on the MBA section of business law, mining and metals committee. Thank you very much for joining us today. And the next person we have on our panel is Mrs. Jumoke Fajemirokun. Mrs. Fajemirokun is a partner at ENR Advisory, a boutique law firm here in Lagos, Nigeria, where she advises on a diverse range of mining-related acquisitions, financing, regulatory compliance, etc. And she's very highly regarded in the sector. Which takes the credit for why she currently chairs the NBA-SBL mining committee, beg your pardon. Mrs. Fajemirokun is also highly regarded by Who is Who Legal, and she actively contributes to industry policy as co-lead of the mining thematic group at the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. She also brings to this webinar her very vast experience in international development finance, having worked with the International Finance Corporation and the World Bank Group between 2012 and 2013. Thank you so much, Mrs. Fajemirokun. It's a pleasure to have you here today. Okay. Then the last but not the least, we have Mr. Fola Fagbule, who is a senior banker with over 15 years of experience in infrastructure finance across Africa. Mr. Fagbule, which undoubtedly is one of the DFIs with the most, I would say, vested interest or the largest investment portfolio in the mining industry in Africa. He leads corporate finance, mergers and acquisitions, capital raising, and technical advisory for major infrastructure projects and investments in sub-Saharan Africa. And Mr. Fagbule has advised on a broad range of matters and clients, including governments, sovereign wealth funds, and private sector players. It is such a pleasure to have you all today on today's panel. And just to quickly remind us of what the ground rules are, kindly ensure that your microphones are muted and that your cameras are turned off over the course of this panel session. So our first question today will be addressed to Mr. Daudu. Please kindly confirm that you can hear me, Mr. Daudu.
Yes, I can. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Thank you so much once again for joining us. So the first question is essentially the fact that Nigeria's mining industry is experiencing what we may refer to as a very timely resurgence, especially in the face of sort of a very obvious shift away from conventional sources of energy towards other renewable alternatives. But not many people know what is really happening within the industry. So for those of us young lawyers and other members of the audience, could you just kindly do us the favor of giving us a broad insight into the regulatory framework, the licensing regime, and maybe other necessary considerations that you think that anyone who is interested in the industry should know about?
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Fortune, for the question. Glad to be part of this. The regulatory, as in the legal regime, as in guiding the industry, is quite can be a bit elaborate, but we can drill it down into. Oh, okay, 1 second. We can drill it down to, as in just a few ones, quite a number that's as in govern the space. We start from the Nigerian Minerals and Mining Act, the regulation made pursuant to it. Nigerian Minerals and Mining Act was enacted in 2007, and the regulation made pursuant to it was in 2011.
Then we have of course, the issue about environment will come in there. So there's the um, NESRA Act that will come in as well. There's the debate about uh, extractive industry transparency initiative. You have to, as in, ensure that compliance is given to that. The Environmental Impact Assessment Act is also there. Then the regular ones, of course, the Land Use Act and the Constitution, which is the ground of ground. Then you have if it has within that space, a person can own a license and a company can own a license. So to some extent, the Companies and Allied Matters Act. And what else? So all these all together, as in give you, why, because it touches on a number of things, as in certain other laws may be applicable that are not principal in that regard. So you have the main principal act is the Nigerian Minerals and Mining Act, the Constitution, the Land Use Act, the regulation made pursuant to the Nigerian Minerals and Mining, as in the Nigerian Minerals and Mining Act 2007. Then what else do you have? So those are, as in, essentially the regulations that govern the space. For a young lawyer coming into that space, you need to be familiar with all this and be conversant with the provisions thereat to, as in, make a mark. Definitely, you need to be conversant with the operators within the industries, the development, not only in Nigeria but even abroad. Even though there have been mining going on since the early 1900s in Nigeria, as in, cast your mind back to the coal we have in Old Enugu and the tin we have in Plateau. There have been some form of mining going on in Nigeria, but recently, like the question rightly framed, there's been a resurgence because we've now discovered that there are quite a number of solid minerals that we have within our shops. We can only make it better if we are able to explore here and even make some form of refining to add value to it, to be able to add value to the society as well. So it is important for any practitioner, young practitioner that is willing to be part of the process, to be conversant with all those principal legislations and regulations. The 2007 Act is actually a bit comprehensive. The regulations made thereto is very, very comprehensive as well. And I can say that to a very large extent, we have not actually tested the efficacy of the Nigerian Mining Act and regulations made there. So there's still a lot to be done in that particular area to have a robust mining industry. So anybody that is coming in definitely would have to be conversant with those provisions, can bring new ideas into it. I'm aware that some months ago, there were moves to actually propose an amendment to the Nigerian Minerals and Mining Act, but there's been a discussion in that. I'm aware that there's a committee formed to look into it, and I think that has been put on hold for now. To a very large extent, the Mining Act has not been fully implemented for one to say that, okay, these are the gaping holes that will need to be amended. I know the fears about comparison with what we have in the oil and gas space, but this is a bit different because it's solid minerals. They are alike, but a bit different because the sort of expertise needed in this particular space is, I think, largely is readily available locally and internationally. And the players you see largely that will commit themselves to it are largely international. The leading mining company in Nigeria today is actually headed by a Nigerian, even though the company is listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange. But so a lot still have to be, as in we have a lot to do with respect to the laws, but the laws we have as in at present regulating the space are largely, in my own opinion, adequate. And if any of our colleagues, young colleagues, is interested in that, those are the areas you need to be conversant with. Those are the laws you need to be familiar with. And at least is the more often it is the players in an industry that drive what is the development in that industry. So one needs to be conversant with the players in the industry. They bring the innovation to the table, and our colleagues will need to be aware and be abreast of that innovation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daudu. I think that was a very clear way to get the conversation started. Thanks for providing that introductory insight. My next question goes to Mrs. Oshosami, and I think off the back of what Mr. Daudu has addressed, there's increased interest in critical minerals within Nigeria, especially lithium. I mean, with Nigeria's lithium oxide concentration being between 1 to 13%, which is, fairly impressive. So I would like for you to give us a sense of what some of the recent trends within the industry have been, especially maybe from a policy perspective, investment angle, etc.
Okay, thank you very much, Fortune. I'd like to thank the NBA-YLF for this privilege and opportunity to share knowledge. And it's very exciting to see that we have a future generation. And so let's hope for Nigeria. So yeah, talking about lithium, I hope my audio is okay. Can you hear me? Am I being heard?
Yes, your audio is fantastic.
Okay.
Yes,
yeah, so please let me know if there's any discrepancy with my connection. Yeah, so you asked about lithium specifically. Lithium is one of the popular critical minerals today because of the role that it plays in the energy transition program globally. It's one of the principal minerals in battery manufacturing, specifically lithium batteries, which are used to power electric vehicles and other mobility devices. Now, Nigeria, again, is blessed to have a significant deposit of lithium. As to whether we have sufficiently harnessed the potential of that mineral, I doubt that very much. There's so many things swimming around my head, but I'll try and stick to the specific question you've asked, which is what we've seen, the trend that we've seen. What's happening at the moment is that there's a lot of interest in Nigeria, specifically because of lithium and other critical minerals, such as rare earths, zinc, tin, and all these are minerals that are used for battery production. So as countries and regions focus on implementing their energy transition plans, what most regions are doing or countries are doing at the moment is they're stocking up on battery minerals. Now, a lot of interest has come from Asia at the moment, again, because there's a huge ESG element that surrounds mining and raising finance for mining. So if you're coming from the global north, if you're coming from, let's say, America or Europe, for you to get sufficient financing for an investment in any mineral, especially critical minerals like lithium and the likes, you need to be able to demonstrate the source of the mineral is coming from a sustainable source and, is reliably sourced responsibly sourced, sorry. So the framework to demonstrate, to check those boxes is not yet completely in place for us here in Nigeria. And so that limits the number of investors or the areas where investors can come in from. So, in Asia, some of those standards are not so stringently applied. And so, we're getting a lot of attention from that part of the globe. And there's a lot of exportation. A lot of the lithium that is being extracted really are being extracted for exportation purposes. Now, the current government has been very big on beneficiation, which is value addition. In other words, a policy direction that tries to discourage the exportation of raw ores without some value having been added. But when you talk about value addition, that's another thing we need to take a critical look at. Again, which I won't digress too much into, but maybe as the webinar progresses, there will be an opportunity to delve deeper into that. Also, let me know when I need to stop, please. So in terms of what we're seeing, like I said, influx of foreign investment, mainly from Asia. And then on the domestic side as well, we do have domestic investors as well, license holders, leaseholders who do not have the sufficient capital to derive benefit from their mineral titles. And so we're seeing a lot of joint venture arrangements happening between local players as well as domestic investors and foreign investors. So if you have a license and you're lucky to find a technical partner who considers your site to be viable, then that's an opportunity for a joint venture. So we're seeing lots of joint ventures. We're also seeing partnerships as well between state governments and private investors. So some state governments, for instance, have incorporated state mining companies and have applied for mineral titles. And so they have mineral titles. And many of those sort of states are states where they have a legacy of mining. So for instance, Enugu State, coal, Enugu State has the largest deposit of coal in Nigeria. So, that sort of effort, that sort of initiative is going on there. So we were seeing that as well, local partnerships between state governments and private investors. So maybe I should stop there at this time to allow other panelists.
Thank you very much. I almost got lost in the lecture, to be very honest. I nearly forgot I was moderating. Thank you very much for that very, insightful discourse. So, Mrs. Fajemirokun, kindly, Mrs. Ososami has highlighted some of the developments and also underscored a few of the challenges within the industry, ranging from, the high cost of mining mechanization, which has sort of stifled the ability of local operators to do much with their licenses. But despite the glaring potential that the industry seems to present, what do you consider to be some of the challenges, especially maybe from a legal perspective? What do you consider to be some of the challenges that have impeded the growth of the industry, maybe in recent times especially? Mrs. Fajemirokun, please.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I'm having trouble putting my video on.
No, that's fine. We can hear you very clearly.
Okay. No, I can't turn my video on. You need to disable it.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Let me see how. Let me do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Fantastic. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much to the YLF for inviting me to participate in this discussion. It's my first time interacting with the forum, and it's exciting to hear what you're seeking to do and how you're trying to build a pipeline of experienced lawyers in the energy and natural resources space. So just building up on what Mr. Dauda and Mr. Ososami have mentioned about the mining sector, the legal framework. Kehinde talked about how the framework itself, the law, the Minerals and Mining Act, is fairly comprehensive, as well as the regulations that have been issued pursuant to it. We've seen a lot of interest, particularly in the battery minerals. And because of our rich endowment, there's a huge potential that we can leverage on this demand for these battery minerals to fuel our industrial growth. We haven't over the last several decades and the years since we've seen this increased interest, we've not seen the scale and the quality of investments that the sector is capable of. And in my experience, there are several challenges that may account for that, but I'll just highlight some legal challenges that I think will stand out. And I think a lot of them center around the governance of the sector. So as Mr. Dowdy mentioned, we have a good law that sets a solid foundation, but implementation has been weak. So one of those areas of implementation, I would say, is the principles around the use it or lose it framework. So when a mineral title is granted, mineral titles are exploration licenses, mining leases, quarry leases, small-scale mining leases. There's an obligation to utilize those titles to carry out the activities, the required mining and exploration activities, depending on the title that you hold. And there are principles in the law that then require that if these titles are inactive, then it's liable to revocation or suspension, depending on what the matter is. But what we've seen is that a lot of large areas are being held by inactive titles, and this use it or lose it principle is not being effected properly, such that serious investors don't have that many options to come into, right? And so recently we've seen the ministry or the Mining Cadastral Office, which is the agency that issues mineral titles, take action in this regard by revoking licenses or leases that have been held by people that haven't paid their annual service fee. So that's the low-hanging fruit, to know those that are inactive. But that's just a fraction, because there are many of them that will pay their annual service fees, but are not doing anything. They're not submitting the periodic reports, or even if they're submitting the periodic reports, it's not showing that real work is being taken. So I think a lot of actions need to be geared in that direction of ensuring effective implementation and enforcement of the laws. And I understand that there are challenges around funding and capacity of the ministry in itself. So this would account for why it's not being implemented. So there needs to be increased budgetary allocation to the ministry to fuel this. This year, they got a higher budgetary allocation. So my hope is that there's more attention is given to that space. Also around sector governance, we've seen a lot of conflict between the federal and state government with respect to mining. So while mining is on the exclusive list, federal government has the exclusive right to grant mining titles to operators, but the state governments control the land on which this mining titles are granted, and as well as have oversight over environmental laws. And because of the impact that they've seen, I guess because of the ineffective regulation from the federal and the fact that state governments are more closely connected to the negative impacts of mining, you see that they're taking actions to either issuing executive orders to ban mining, harassing operators, and basically doing things that they're not, they don't have the regulatory authority to do. And this has left operators uncertain as to what framework they should adhere to, what regulatory requirements they should adhere to, and all of this creates uncertainty that has also impeded investment in the sector. Also around sector governance, I think the fact that we don't have an independent regulator for the mining sector is also a contributory factor. The Ministry of Solid Minerals Development currently serves as policymaker, promoter, and regulator, which is not very ideal. We've seen independent regulatory bodies in the telecom sectors and electricity sector, and we've seen the sort of order that has brought to those industries, and even the petroleum sector has moved in that direction. So I think it's time for the mining sector to move in that direction and have the sector being more professionally managed. So these are just a few of the challenges I see. Another big concern is around illegal mining. When we see that, not enough action is being taken to stop illegal mining, it sort of reduces investor confidence in the system. But the good news now is that I think over the last 1 year, the ministry has established some mining marshals, and in the last few months, I've been seeing a lot of reports in the news about various arrests being made to tackle illegal mining, but a lot of work still needs to be done in that regard. So just to close, the minerals are there. We have a solid foundation, but this sector challenges around governance of the sector will need to be challenged. Investors need to see that the laws are being implemented properly to instill investor confidence. There needs to be clarity as well, and as well as better engagement with stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fajemirokun. I mean, you've highlighted quite a number of very important points, which I believe sort of capture what the most common challenges are within the sector, especially along the lines of lack of proper governance infrastructure enforcement, as a matter of fact, and then the issue around the revocation of licenses for failure of the license holders to meet up with the operational parameters. And, sometimes this can also be, I think lack of sufficient funding might take credit for why some license holders are not able, to get to the field as much as possible. But we'll address that in the course of the presentation. You also made a very important point along the lines of the overlap between the obligations of the federal government in relation to the regulation of mining activities, and then the rights of states as it relates to land and environmental compliance obligations. And we'll also look at that very briefly. But I think we'll just take a turn to the finance authority himself, Mr. Fagbuli, just to sort of guide us, provide some insight into what the key opportunities within the Nigeria's mining sector is from an investments perspective. I mentioned earlier that the Africa Finance Corporation has one of the largest investment portfolios within the mining sector in Africa. So, Mr. Fagbuli, very quickly, what do you consider to be some of the opportunities within the sector, especially with the increasing demand for certain critical minerals like lithium, gold, etc., etc.? And second question, it's twofold. How do you think investors might also be able to position themselves to capitalize on these opportunities? Mr.
Hello,
Fagbuli.
how are you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, very well, yes, very clearly. Thank you.
Okay, I'm unable to put on my video. I imagine that's on your end.
So I think
you can hear me clearly.
You can maximize the screen and click on the video icon as opposed to maybe, okay.
There you go. It's allowed me now. Excellent. So I hope you can now see and hear me clearly. Thank you for the invitation to contribute to this very important webinar. I note your two questions and I will answer them in the course of my remarks. But it's an extremely important opportunity for us at AFC to speak with some of the young lawyers in the country working or interested to work in this area. Legal advice and legal input is essential to the structuring of all financial transactions. And it is always extremely important for us to engage with the legal community. So thank you for inviting us. Delighted to be here. My name is Fola Fagbuli and I work for AFC. In relation to this topic, I want to tell you where I come from looking at this. AFC, we started investing in mining probably in 2010 or 2011. And I recall working with the team to develop our mining business plan at the time. And in doing that, we scanned, markets all over the continent where we could make an impact and make a significant profit from doing natural resources business. Nigeria was not high on the list of the countries that we would invest capital in the mining industry in Africa. And there are many reasons for that, even though our entire capital at that time was from Nigeria. And Nigeria was the founder of AFC, and there's every reason why we would want to do more business in Nigeria. And yet, it was not anywhere near the top of our list. Since then, we've built out a more than $1 billion mining portfolio across the continent, including the first industrial scale gold project in Nigeria, which is the Segilola gold project done by Thor Explorations PLC, which is a company that I helped raise that financing for. And that financing ultimately, AFC committed more than $100 million across various aspects of the capital structure to get that project done. And I think it's not exaggerating to say that without AFC, that project wouldn't exist. Now, the project is extremely successful, has been producing on average about 80,000 ounces per annum of gold for export to the international markets, which is by every standard a highly successful gold operation on a global basis. Medium sized, but highly successful. That project has also done well for us financially. It's been an excellent investment. So there are many reasons why we would advocate to do another large-scale mining project in Nigeria. But in spite of all of this, Nigeria is still nowhere near the top of the jurisdictions that we pay attention to when it comes to mining in the continent today. And there are a number of reasons for that. I think it's very important for you as young lawyers to understand that Nigeria is not a world-class mining jurisdiction, right? So we are not in the Premier League, if you like, of mining globally. And there's nothing wrong with that. We are more in the first division, to use a football analogy. And there are many, many reasons for that. So, in oil and gas, we are absolutely a Premier League country, but not in mining, not in solid minerals. The level of prospectivity of minerals in Nigeria is good. We have an abundance of minerals, but relative to global standards, it doesn't ring a bell, right? When, capital allocators are thinking about mining jurisdictions. Policy and regulatory stability, we've talked about a lot of that in this webinar today. As you can see, right from the first speaker, there's so much uncertainty, there's so many different rules and regulations, so many things you have to grasp your hand around in order to be able to do mining business in Nigeria. And we've experienced this as well, doing this. The quality of the infrastructure, the roads, the energy, the water, the telecommunications, even the export facilities that are in place, the railway, this is not a great place to do mining business. And that's before we even come to security, which is the last and most important point that I'll talk about. Access to capital and skilled labor. It's not a world-class jurisdiction from that perspective, right? Australia, South Africa, all of these other places, that's where the best talent and the best skill set in mining want to go to. So we're not getting the best in that sense either. ESG standards, the quality of how we've constructed the environmental and social governance standards regime in Nigeria is not world-class, and it's not what miners are used to. So fiscal competitiveness, also an issue. And finally, most importantly, security and the rule of law, which is where you all come in as young lawyers. We're very lowly ranked in this area. So security is not important, is not just important for operational safety, but that's actually where you have moral license to do what you're doing in that community. Because any community where you have significant mineral resources in Nigeria, artisanal miners have been working there for generations in many cases. And so if you want to do a different thing there, you have to earn the right to operate. And a lot of that is about security. A lot of that is about the rule of law. And a lot of that is about community relations and how you relate with these people and how you form them into a part of the solution so that they see it as a win-win, because otherwise you will not be able to operate safely. So with these remarks, I do hope that I have been able to squeeze in responses to the two very important questions that you raised, but happy to engage again in more detail. But I'll just yield now so that there's an opportunity for others to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fabuli. You've addressed quite a lot, and it's really good to know what the AFC is doing. We'll address that a bit more detail as the conversation progresses. But I want to just know, before I let you go, I just wanted to know if there are certain prospects that you might also be able to highlight compared to maybe other more advanced jurisdictions like South Africa, which has been able to develop a framework that actually ensures that mining development activities progress. So other than the prospects, what do you think we can do differently, both for the license holders, investors, and for government?
What we can do differently is the same thing that we need to do differently in relation to electricity, for example. We need to be better organized, right? So fundamentally, when you're dealing with significant amount of capital being deployed into long-term projects where there's a significant degree of uncertainty about what the future is going to look like, it is very important to the people allocating that capital, the people making investment decisions in relation to that kind of capital. It is very important for them to be working with a system that is predictable, a system that they understand what the likely events are going to be over the next 5, 10, 15 years. And the only way to present such a system to capital providers, which we need absolutely as much capital as we can get our hands on in order to drive economic development across various sectors, including mining in Nigeria, the only way you can do that is to present a very organized front. So the quality of your rules and regulations, the quality of your processes, the rule of law, which I spoke about earlier, the quality of the legal system in dispensing with situations that occur, the restraint on the part of political authorities to not do things that could have a negative impact on the investor perception of the country at any point in time. So that restraint is also important. So organization and restraint, I mean, to use a very practical example, but I won't give names, the project that we financed very recently, and this was in the news in Nigeria, the state government, went and shut the place down. The first industrial scale gold mining project in the history of Nigeria, diversifying Nigeria's export earnings in a very meaningful manner. And they went and shut it down in relation to some dispute or the other. Now, the company, they're professionals. They know what to do and they know how to handle such situations. And they dealt with it and they will keep dealing with it. But they shouldn't have to deal with that. So that's what we can do different. And that's how we can be more, we can attract more capital and grow better in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fagbuli. I think it goes without saying that the challenges within the industry are quite enormous. I mean, you mentioned the Segilola project, which is one that spanned over 2 decades, if I'm not mistaken, before actual development activity could commence. And even right now, there's still challenges around infrastructure, etc. But I mean, the company is doing pretty well as a junior miner, and I think it's taking off really fantastically. So my next question would be to Mr. Daudu, and this borders around some of the safeguards that, some of the challenges we've identified relate to community engagements, etc., and the ability of license holders to effectively comply with the obligations under the Act, the regulations, and other laws that apply to the activities. So the Nigerian Minerals and Mining Act 2007 imposes safeguards aimed at protecting host community and landowners' rights. And one of such is the requirement of community development agreements as preconditions for development activities. But how do you think that to what extent do you think that the laws around CDAs have been enforced? And in terms of the kind of challenges that this has resulted in, community tensions, litigation, disputes, etc., what do you think can be done differently to ensure that these issues are well managed? And what sort of legal remedies are realistically available to some of these aggrieved communities?
Thank you for that question again, Fortune. As in my honest answer to that, what can we do better? I don't think it's actually legal. I think it's as in we need to check our grid, particularly the communities. Like the last speaker mentioned, Mr. Bafabule mentioned, you've noticed that even before companies, as in investors, go into an area, there are artisanal miners in place there. These artisanal miners are not, as in, yes, you may look at them as regular people, as in just trying to make ends meet. But when you dig deeper, you see that they are actually being, I don't know how to say this, but I'll say it anyway. There's a big masquerade behind those artisanal miners. So there's that resistance from the beginning. Now, and that's where the innovation by the arts, as in having a community a development agreement, is very, very critical. Now, the next thing you would realize is this is largely most where you find solid minerals like that, they are communal lands. So who are you going to deal with in the very first place? Because is it the traditional ruler and the council? Is it the head of the family? Is it this or is it that? So those issues are there from the beginning, and it's good, as into a very large extent, that even the ministry or the cadastrals in the MCO would tell you that without you having a CDA, as in you can't even move forward in certain regards. You are not able to do certain things if you don't have a CDA in place. And that's why and where the state governments and the local governments usually come in. Mr. Fabule referred to the bit about SRO, as in Segilola. Fortunately, I was involved even before Segilola came on board with respect to that. The people that drove it up until the reverse takeover in 2016 started in 1993. So they've dealt with, as in, people within that community up until that time. So when it's always all these people, as in people, certain people will come up when they see that, okay, something significant is being done around this place. Now, that safeguard, as in the issue of community agreement, is very, very key, is important. It gives safeguards to the community as a whole. But I think what needs to be done, not particularly legally, as in with the community development agreement, there's a legal basis upon which the community can take on certain things and can make certain demands. And some of these investors are actually even doing CSR already. Now, what needs to be done is, one, to check the avarice of our community, as in people within that same community who believe that, okay, since you are even at the stage of exploration, you're already selling gold or diamond or lithium or anything. They want billions in compensation as well.
So, Mr. Daudu, I don't know if it's from my end, but you seem to.
Sorry? Can you hear me?
So
I can.
I think Fortune's network has it because I can
Oh,
hear you.
okay. So,
Thank you,
so,
Mr.
yeah,
Fabule. Yes, so the internet.
The major issue is determining who in the community has the appropriate authority to deal with, as in at least for the mining companies in the very first place. And determining that is as in, I won't lie to you, is a Herculean, in the sense that there's, like, from experience, there was a time a certain company has been dealing with a particular head of the community and things are going normal. There were no disturbances and all that. But the moment that particular head of the community passed away, two other people or three other people came on board and said that they are the right person to deal with. Now, if you don't have your community development agreement in place as at that time, even if you do, the ministry sometimes insists that, okay, look, there has to be something you have to do. You have to come to some form of resolution with all three of them before you can go forward. So the safeguards for the community, particularly the community now, they're already in existence within the Act and the regulations. It's already protected. Now, are they able to enforce this right? Yes, they can. And more often than not, the ministry is actually, as in, almost always on their side to ensure that those demands are met even before you go to court. Investors in this climate don't ordinarily if they can avoid it, they won't want to go to court in that
Suda is
situation.
recognized for producing outstanding graduates who are now
Sorry.
respected entrepreneurs, software engineers, AI researchers.
I think there's a.
Thank you, Dennis.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So there are safeguards within the within that particular space already. Now, the challenges there are actually there's a bit of a lot of enlightenment has to take place, particularly within the community, so as to see the investors as not coming just to take off minerals from their end, because the multiplier effect for a mining company in any particular community is actually much more than the money they can get immediately, compensation they can get for using the land. Just look at it, the property rights, property value in that area will definitely shoot up. The people working around that area secondly, would want to have schools that in the mining company, would want to have schools that they will send their children to. So that's an opportunity for the state government has more to gain in that in the economic activities that is maybe going on in that particular area. So a lot of enlightenment has to be done, particularly for those communities, so that we try as much as possible to avoid the situation we have found ourselves with respect to oil and gas. But if care is not taken, we're drifting the way the communities are going about it, they're drifting slightly in that direction.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daudu. I'll come back to you very briefly, but just along the lines of the safeguards within the Act, my next question is to Mrs. Fajemi Rokun. And essentially, both the Act and the regulations, and even the NESRA Act and other applicable laws, make provisions for restoration and reclamation of mines lands, especially maybe after mining activities, exploration activities, etc. But the root problem still goes to enforcement mechanisms. Do you think the enforcement mechanisms around mines land reclamation and restoration have been effective enough? And assuming it hasn't been, what do you think can be done to further incentivize these mining development operators, just to ensure that they're able to comply with the minimum sustainable standards within the industry?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. So you're absolutely correct. The law is very clear on, places a clear obligation on mineral title holders to restore and reclaim mined land or mine land that exploration activities has been conducted on. And as part of the requirement, of course, you need to have an environmental impact assessment approved by the Ministry of Environment. But there's also an important document that title holders must submit before they commence operations, which is the Environmental Protection and Rehabilitation Plan, which is supposed to detail the specific rehabilitation actions that you'll take, what the timelines will be, and then the cost of those rehabilitation actions. Importantly, the law talks about the establishment of an environmental protection, environmental rehabilitation, protection and rehabilitation fund, which is to be set up by the minister. And so the plan you submit provides a cost estimate for your rehabilitation and what your yearly contribution will be into that fund. So the structure is that you set aside funds in advance so that you're able to meet up with your reclamation obligations. Whether or not that structure is effective is a different ballgame altogether. But in terms of enforcement, what I do know, and any other person on the call may correct me if I'm wrong, is that the fund has not even been set up yet. So the basis for seeking enforcement of that obligation is not even there. So that now leaves operators having to devise their own mechanisms of either putting money aside or getting insurance products or whatnot to ensure that they meet their reclamation obligations or not, right? Or just wait until that fine day and hope that they can pack up their things and not get caught. So I think enforcement has been weak as far as I know, and it boils down to and you can't really incentivize performance if people are not seeing the consequences of non-performance. So it's important that the sector governance issues are addressed in order to encourage or get people to actually comply with these obligations if they see enforcement and then they comply. And then also, I think the state of the sector, because we're at the moment, we don't have, we've talked about the only industrial scale mine in the country, that's the Secular project. For the most part, mining is at the small scale level. So a lot of the players do not have operating with low level technology and limited technical know-how as to mining, how mining operations are conducted safely and effectively. So I think one of the ways to incentivize performance is to encourage capacity building in this area so that artisanal and small scale miners are able to get trained and understand the sustainable practices, the impact of not engaging in sustainable practices for the community, and also community engagement. So all of this could help improve compliance organically. Also, tying, Bola had talked about funding as well. So one of the key areas, the key challenges in the sector is issues around access to finance. And there are various initiatives that the government has tried to establish either through the Bank of Industry or the Solid Minerals Development Fund. And so if there are clear obligations or clear conditions around sustainable practices and accessing this finance, this could also incentivize operators to comply. But most importantly, I think the framework around enforcement, the framework around how the fund will operate, the framework around, because the law also talks about tax deductibility of contributions to that fund, but how it actually operates is not very clear. So all of this needs to be clarified to even encourage investors to set aside those fundings and to do what is needed to be done to ensure that they rehabilitate and restore land to their predetermined state as the law requires. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Fajemirokum. And I mean, this has been quite an engaging session. Just want to quickly remind us of what the options are. Please ensure that your microphones and cameras are turned off. The general issues around incentives or lack of incentives, lack of enforcement, etc. My next question would be to Mr. Shosami. So Mrs. Fajemirokum has highlighted the Environmental Protection Rehabilitation Fund, which of course Section 30 of the Act, it makes contributions into that fund to be tax deductible. But of course, the fund has not yet been set up. So there's a question around what real incentives exist within the industry, whether for compliance with sustainability obligations or generally just, for holding those licenses. So can you give us a sense of what the incentives are for license holders?
Okay, thanks, Fortune. So with regard to the contribution to the fund, like Jumoke said, the fund hasn't actually been established, at least as far as we know. But typically, as a company in the extractive sector, as a company, an organization should have a policy on its own. So it is expected that a mining company or even an exploration company should internally set up some sort of fund where they're making contributions towards contributing to the statutory fund. And tax deductibility for that purpose isn't actually an incentive. It's just part of your assessment process. In terms of incentives, the Mining Act does list some incentives. Top on the list is the 3-year tax holiday that any company going into mining is entitled to from the first year of operation, with an option to renew for another 2 years. So you're looking at a potential 5-year tax holiday. But when you really look at the benefit of that incentive, it's a bit questionable, because typically if you're in the extractive sector, you don't start to make profits most of the time for the first 3 years. So the first 3 years really have to do with a lot of capital expenditure, which brings me to another incentive that the Act also offers to operators, and that is an accelerated capital allowance regime. So capital allowance essentially is an allowance that is given by the tax laws to a taxpayer to claim any capital expenditure that the taxpayer has incurred in relation to certain types of items. So we have qualifying mining expenditure, for instance. So monies that have been spent on procuring equipment, data, drilling, and so on and so forth. So those sort of expenditure, ideally, in the first year as a company, you can claim maybe as much as 50% of your capital expenditure, your qualifying capital expenditure. But where it becomes an incentive is where the law allows you to claim as much as 95% or more in the first year. So and the implication of that again is a tax deductibility of sorts, right? So that's another incentive. And I think that mining companies will probably find that more useful than the tax holiday. I think if the tax holiday is going to be an incentive, it should either kick in in the year that the company starts to make a profit, or should be extended to as much as 10 years, like the NLNG project had when it was established. You also have an exemption from customs duty, an import duty on equipment that you bring in for mining operations. And then you have the loss carry forward, the 4-year loss carry forward, which again is available to companies that operate in other sectors as well. So that's just a summary of the incentives package from a tax perspective for mining companies. But speaking about incentives, did your question have a second part? I'm sorry. Or you just wanted me to list out the incentives?
Just the incentives necessarily, and how I think you already, in the course of you addressing the first question, you already sort of like cast some light on the second part, because that has to do with how enforceable and to what extent these incentives are being enforced.
Okay. Yeah. So with tax incentives, really, it's easy, relatively. For the tax holiday, for instance, sometimes an error that companies make or taxpayers make is, oh, the law has given me a tax holiday. But what they don't realize is there's still a process for you to actually put in an application to the NIPC for you to be granted that pioneer status, which is the status that entitles you to the tax holiday. So in terms of implementation, I think that it behoves more on the taxpayer to know what steps they need to take. With tax incentives, they're not automatic. Even when the law grants you an incentive, you still need to make an application to the tax authorities for the tax authorities to confirm that you meet the eligibility criteria for the particular incentive that law has granted. But on the side of government, once the taxpayer has been able to demonstrate its eligibility to the incentive, then automatically it should not pose a problem. You just make sure that in every financial year you're keeping accounts, and when you're filing your returns, you're mindful of the fact that you have this incentive and the number of years for which you are entitled to the incentive as well.
Thank you very much. So we'll just drift a little bit into what the Federal Ministry of Solid Mineral Development through the MCO has been doing along the lines of protection of local interests within the industry. So Section 49 of the Act, which relates to the process for obtaining small-scale mining leases, sort of restricts it to Nigerian citizens and entities registered in Nigeria. But there seems to be some sort of lack of clarity whether the restriction to Nigerian companies, obviates the ability of foreigners to, incorporate entities in Nigeria and apply for those licenses. And this is against the actual intention that the ministry has demonstrated towards ensuring that the rights and activities of artisanal miners are to a large extent protected. So what's your take on this sort of lack of clarity around the provisions relating to local content under the Act? And the industry is still growing. And I think you've mentioned that most of what is going on within the industry from an investment perspective is really coming from outside. So there's still huge reliance on foreign direct investment to develop capacity in terms of mechanization, skill, etc. So to what extent do you think the ministry might be able to enforce local content requirements against the need for foreign investment in the industry?
Okay, so let me address the small scale lease issue. Yes, like you said, the Section 49 provides that a Nigerian citizen, when it's an individual applicant or a Nigerian company, and that provision does not qualify the shareholding structure of the Nigerian company. You know, in some regulations, for instance, take for instance the local content regime in cabotage activities, for instance. There's certain provisions that say that not only that the company should be a Nigerian company, but ownership of the company should be, a certain percentage of the ownership of the company should be vested in Nigerians. That's clear. With Section 49, it just says a Nigerian company. And we know from the definition in CAMA that a Nigerian company is a company registered, incorporated in Nigeria, right, with the CAC. It doesn't say anything about the beneficial owners of that company being Nigerians. So a wholly owned Nigerian Nigerian company, wholly owned by foreigners, is a Nigerian company for purposes of that provision. And we've had situations where the MCO has tried to push back that such companies are not allowed or entitled to small-scale mining leases. But that's not within the law. So the position that we have taken is that as long as there is no express classification within the law that beneficial ownership also needs to vest wholly in Nigerians, then a Nigerian company is a company that's been registered at the CAC, and that company can also apply for a small-scale mining lease. And you see, the thing is, for every law is supposed to be an offshoot of policy. Now, we need to go back to the policy behind the small-scale mining lease. The small-scale mining lease really serves other purposes than it being issued in relation to a small site, or the inability to deploy highly mechanized mining methods. It serves the purpose also of trying to formalize the artisanal and small-scale mining, the activities of that community. And so part of the policy direction is for them to form cooperatives and so on and so forth. Now, when you put all of this together, the profile of the applicants, access to financing, and then the scale, it's relatively a low scale of mining activities. That put together is what is behind the small scale mining lease. Now, when you take your mining activities to a higher level, a highly mechanized method of mining, and then, of course, you are now mining on a larger acreage, and then, of course, the profile of your company is such that, you can't be considered to be a small-time miner. At that point, then you shouldn't be allowed to hold on to a small-scale mining lease. And all these checks are actually within the law. But I think the MCO did say that they've seen some abuse where people are actually conducting, activities that are not small scale. They're larger in scale than what was envisaged when that small scale mining lease application was put in. And so that's why they push back. But like I said, if you are a Nigerian company, even when you're not, the beneficial ownership is not fully vested in Nigerians, but you check all the other boxes, you meet all the other eligibility criteria, there's no reason why you can't apply for an SSML. Now, coming to the issue of local content. As you know, in the oil and gas industry, we do have a local content regime that's been in place since 2010 and has served Nigerians very well. It's opened up the sector to Nigerian businesses and created employment opportunities and growth within the sector. In 2020, there was an attempt to introduce a local content regime into other sectors other than the oil and gas sector in Nigeria through a bill. And that bill was titled the Nigerian Local Content Development and Enforcement Bill. Of course, the bill fell through because it was premature. Because when we talk about local content, there's so many factors that need to be taken into consideration. You know, my co-speakers, Fola has touched on something that is very critical and which I was tempted to talk about when we're talking about incentives, for instance. And what I was going to say, for instance, is that take tax incentives. When a foreign investor is coming into a region, their first consideration is actually not tax incentives. The first consideration is the geopolitical stability in that region. The second concern is the risk of expropriation. So, for instance, we talked about, Segilola and what happened in Osun State, where the state government came in and shut the facility down. That's a threat of expropriation right there, okay? Tax considerations would be number 4 or 5. Before tax considerations is the issue of certainty as well, So when we talk about local content, a local content policy that will be successful must be one that has looked at the viability of the industry from a perspective of backward and forward linkages. What do we mean by that? Right now, as we stand, the Nigerian mining sector really is still relatively disorganized. We've talked about consent issues, and the community issues. We've talked about so many issues. I think Jumoke and Kendi touched a lot on that. So we're not, the sector is not ripe for local content as it stands. We do not have the sufficient capacity to move from first division, or what I would even call half division. As far as I'm concerned, even that first division is, before we get to the Premier League. When you're in the Premier League, then you can talk about local content, because at that point, you've successfully attracted, the right technology, talent that your own local people can learn from. So there's been a lot of capacity building, shadowing within industries. Today, the Nigerian oil and gas sector is benefiting from the local content policy because you have domestic players who have worked in multinationals and have learned the trade and are now able to replicate that through the establishment of indigenous oil companies. And today now we have the Seplats, right? Recently, Seplat took over Mobile Producing, okay? And of course, we have the Dangote refinery as well. And so before we get to local content in mining, we need to first of all have a viable operating mining sector. We do not have that yet. Segilola is the only junior miner we have in Nigeria. We have some other mining companies. Well, maybe not. We have the gold one, Koso, I've forgotten their name now. We also have a gold company, a gold mine. But there are not many. There are not many yet for us to say that at this point we're bringing in local content. If we want to introduce local content, yes, local content at the level of ancillary skill sets, such as legal advisory services, accounting, insurance, and things like that. That's understandable. But to bring in local content, a local content policy that starts to restrict, that could potentially restrict the foreign direct investment that we need, which would bring in the technology and the skills that we need to develop the sector, to then be able to transfer those skills to people domestically. We're not there yet. We're not there yet at all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shosami. I mean, what I get from all that you've yes, I can. I was just saying thank you very much. That was very detailed, and it came from, of course, a very informed background, not just from someone who advises clients, but someone who also understands, the dynamics of the industry and the regulations. We'll move a bit, maybe piggyback off a point that Mrs. Fajem Miracle had raised earlier, but Mr. Daudu will do the honors of addressing this question, and it has to do with the overlap or the seeming overlap between the constitutional rights of the federal government in relation to the granting of mineral rights, regulation of mining and exploration activities, as well as the rights of state governments in relation to land title and ensuring that environmental compliance within their states are sufficiently enforced to the fullest extent. So sometimes there seems to be a lack of clarity as to where the line is between compliance with state obligations and, of course, compliance with the obligations owed to the federal government. And this can put license holders in sort of a fix. So do you believe that there's indeed an overlap? And to what extent do you think that this dual system is likely to contribute to certain disputes, especially between operators and land title holders, and even complicate enforcement? Thank you. Because of time.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much for that question. I will say straight away that, one, yes, there's an appearance of overlap, but really and truly, if you drill down, there's really no overlap. My experience, from experience, I've seen that what I've noticed is that, okay, and this is not law per se, we'll go back to the law bits now. States, as in, I mean the subnational, have tried as much as possible to see how they can insert themselves into extracting from, as in getting more from that particular space. The Constitution is very clear as to the where the rights of mineral rights situate. Very clear. It is vested in the federal government. The Mineral Act is clear too, to the extent that it said, look, where you have it in commercial quantity, it belongs to the federal government, and they will acquire the land where that is situated will be acquired in line with the Land Use Act. So there's a delineation, there's a recognition of the fact that, look, the land in every state resides with the governor, but the mineral rights in the land is with the federal government. So there's an expectation from that the federal government would always carry the state government along where that is discovered in large quantity. Look, as in this acquisition has to take place. That's clear with respect to land. I don't think, except we want to muddy the water, there's no overlap per se with respect to that. The law recognizes that the land resides with the governor. Mineral rights reside with the federal government. The law expects that the federal government would take steps to acquire the land where they find it in commercial quantity in accordance with the Land Use Act. So he has to work with the state government in that regard. Now, because the mining generally is in the exclusive legislative list, the issue of environment surrounding that area largely falls within the purview of the federal government as well. And what I've noticed, or what I've seen in practice, is that whenever they are trying to, so a company has to carry out all the environmental impact assessment studies and this and that, and submit same to the Ministry of Solid Minerals, MCO, and the Ministry of Environment, as the case may be. Now, whenever they want to do any inspection I'm aware that officials of the Ministry of Environment, MCO, and other federal government agencies almost always inform the states, as in where the land is, where the mining is taking place, to as in involve them in going along with the officials of the environmental standards from that state. Now, the requirements or the standards for ensuring that we have a sustainable environment with respect to mining activities is pretty much standardized, as in we know. It's not that the requirement for the state government is different. It's the same standard. It is what is obtainable, the standard that the federal government has put in place that a mining operation would have to comply with is the same pretty much everywhere. As in, maybe the difference will now be the nature of solid minerals being extracted in that particular instance. So the experience has taught me that, look, most state governments try to just insert themselves into that thing. And what it does, it discourages even investors from doing that, because that will be multiple layers. Maybe you pay certain fee to the federal government, then you pay the same fee for the same thing to federal government. State government that I have seen, the way they've worked about, as in with this, is just to extract, to get more from mining operation, forgetting the fact that, look, there's a place for derivation for them in the Constitution, clearly stated, the 13% will still come to them. There's a place for personal income tax. There's a place for a whole other economic activities that will be generated from that particular activities within that state. Now, I don't see overlap. I think largely the overlap is being concocted by states that want to be part of it. And now, particularly with respect to with mining industry, states have the opportunity. Mrs. Ososami mentioned it. States can actually incorporate companies, mining companies, and apply for licenses. Do you get? Then, as in, do the necessary work, bring it up to speed, and maybe demand for a stake when they have invest as in partners in that thing, or operate it on their own if they want to do it. Now, to deal with environmental issues in that regard, it will still be federal government that would set the standard for environmental, the necessary environmental standards in that regard. Now, so I think largely the insertion of states in that particular area is to extract from the mining operation. There's no overlap, as far as I'm concerned, with respect to issue of environmental standard, because it's clearly delineated. The standards, as in the mining, is in the exclusive legislative list. The land ought to have been acquired by the federal government. That gives the federal government the power to go into that area and ensure that environmental standards are maintained to keep the environment as in proper. Issue of remediation has been dealt with by the Act. So what is it that the states want to actually, as in, do other than what has been done in that regard? What I see that they want to get is actually extract some more money, get out to make more money in that particular situation. So even from the law, the analysis of the law, the overlap is concocted as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just
I think I don't know if other people will have maybe difference of opinion. This may be as a result of experience, because I've seen mining company face serious issues, and they come up with all sorts of issues from states, as in raise environment, as in degradation of the environment. And when questions are asked about this particular standard they are dealing with, where is your report? what report have you given as a state, have you come up with to deal with that? Mr. Fabule mentioned a bit about what SRL is facing in a particular state. For some reason, I'm from that state. I know a bit of it. I've been in the room when this is being discussed. It was as in totally a way to just be part of it and extract more from it.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. So I think just on a light note, some people might consider it to be somewhere between main character syndrome, wanting to get a larger piece of the cake, and maybe, you know, out of some legitimate interest. But back to Mr. Fabule, it goes without saying, yeah, we've identified and have been sufficiently able to establish that while there are prospects within the industry, there are also some attendance risks. Yeah. So from your perspective as someone who's very active within the industry from an investment angle, what do you think are some of the structuring considerations or financial instruments that investors might consider looking to enter into this market in view of all the risks that exist? So would you suggest maybe a project finance structure, a hybrid of debt and equity, you know, just anything that you feel like would be most efficient given the challenges?
No, thank you. And this is something that we've already taken action on. So I'm going to be describing more or less what we're doing and how we're engaging with the mining industry in Nigeria. Because as you've seen, I mean, you have a very experienced panel of people. So this has been a great conversation. And as you can see, there is a fundamental structure of this industry that is not optimal for large-scale investment as of today. That's the reality, right? The industry is optimized for smaller scale activity, for entrepreneurial activity, as opposed to large corporate activity. It's going to be very challenging to sanction large scale projects in an industry as described by this panel of experts today. So the industry has been optimized for small scale. And what we figured is that then we need to find out how can we support these small scale enterprises and help them to migrate to where we think the industry ought to be, which is projects like Segilola, which is where we think the industry ought to be. So that's why we've partnered with the presidential artisanal mining thing that the government has created. I forget the exact name.
Is it the AFC Solid Mineral Development Funds partnership? Correct. I see there's something like that. Yeah.
Correct. To create a funding pathway for smaller enterprises, right? So if you're a small entrepreneur, you have, you know, access to resources in a part of the country. You've done some of the basic studies to prove that the resources are there. You have a bit of an understanding about community relations and how to secure the moral license to operate in the area, and you've been able to accomplish, you know, something in that regard. There's funding available for projects like that as a partnership between the government and AFC, where PwC has been appointed as an independent advisor that will look through all of the various project risks associated with that project, because again, it's very important for us that it should not become politicized or should not become just a way of disbursing largesse politically. And so there will be an independent technical assessment of what you submit, which you know, is an open platform for people to submit on the internet. And then, you know, assess, make a decision, and then disburse, you know, small sums of project development financing, right? Really to help those projects get to the next level. Because to become, you know, a viable, long-term, sustainable mining business or mining enterprise, there are some basic standards of project development that you must adhere to. So that's what we're trying to do, is to intervene at that level. Our belief, fundamental belief, and our experience, lived experience in every other part of the country tells us that that's not how to do and scale mining, right? That's what we have to do, given the reality of what Nigeria, how Nigeria is set up to do. How to scale up mining is to do 10, 15, 20 more industrial scale projects. And that requires engagement at the highest levels to address all of the issues that have been discussed today. It requires being extremely intentional about removing the roadblocks. And all of the issues that have been discussed today are roadblocks on account of the political economy of the country, primarily, and then roadblocks on account of the lack of state capacity, which has filtered down to the local level, and communities and actors within communities have taken ownership of the situation in the absence of state capacity. And that makes it very difficult for a wholesale agreement to be struck between a provider of capital and somebody that can guarantee the right to operate without issues in the area. So in the absence of that, you have all this sort of, it becomes a mushroom industry, which is what it is today. So, but that's not how to be competitive globally on mining. It can't be a mushroom industry. It has to be an industrial scale operation. And so we continue to engage, particularly with project owners and project developers, people who have the same kind of mindset that we have, and who are able to work with us, work with the government to create the conditions to deploy sizable amounts of capital into mining. We are very open for business to do that. But at the same time, we're doing what we're doing at the sort of, call it venture capital level.
Thank you, Mr. Fagbuli. I mean, I'm very happy that you mentioned, what AFC is doing, especially in terms of its partnership with the Solid Mineral Development Fund project development facility, because I was going to hint that. So apart from this partnership, do you sort of want to give us a sense of what else the AFC might be doing, or what are other projections or plans that you have in the pipelines? I mean, just in case I have a mining project, just to prepare myself, just saying.
Oh no, we're extremely excited about the natural resources potential, not just for Nigeria, but Africa as a whole, right? The world needs the resources that we have. In this era of geopolitical tension and trade wars, and particularly the world becoming bipolar at the minimum, but probably multipolar in the long run, Africa has the opportunity to take more ownership of our resources. Most of our capital is sitting within the resources that is underneath the ground across the continent. We ought to have done better on other areas, human capital and technology and what have you, but at least resources we have. And so there's an opportunity for us to take more ownership and govern those resources better, attract better and more appropriate forms of long-term financing to get those resources produced, to beneficiate those resources, add value to them domestically, so that we can create value and we can create jobs and we can create bigger enterprises within the continent. Projects like Dangote Refinery, which an earlier speaker talked about, that beneficiates raw crude oil found domestically, very important, and we want to replicate the same in mining. So we're very interested and very open to project ideas. We have the ability to engage more or less everywhere across the capital structure of a project. So if you have a project, whether it's project development, which is more or less the early preliminary studies that need to be done, we can finance those, or whether it is the actual construction of the mine, the actual build out of the mine. All of this we got involved with in the Segilola Gold Project, and we've gotten involved with in $1 billion by value of mining projects across the continent: manganese, bauxite, diamonds, gold. We're closing now a massive gold project in Sierra Leone, which is going to be very transformational for that country. There's no reason why that couldn't be another gold project in Nigeria, or another lithium project in Nigeria, or any of the other resources that we have in abundance in Nigeria. So we're open and we're partnering closely with the government, and you can be certain that where the opportunity presents itself, we will be involved in creating another large-scale mining project in Nigeria. But in the meantime, we're engaging at the level where we can.
Thank you so much for that. It's really good to see, all that the AFC is doing. And I believe that every one of our speakers today have sort of expressed an optimism around the prospects of the mining industry, despite the challenges that are replete in it. So hopefully a time comes when Nigeria is actually ready, to warehouse this volume of investments that, just flying around our faces. So my next question would be to Mrs. Fajem Mirokun, and it's still along the lines of, risk navigation. So from a legal due diligence perspective, what do you think lawyers can do to ensure that their clients receive the right counsel, and that mining deals are structured in a more efficient way that presents less risks? Because I think there's been a trend around the mining cadastre office issuing licenses to different individuals and entities where such licenses overlap each other. So that's like one concern that has also been developing. So how do you think, what sort of due diligence mechanics you think can be put in place to ensure that all of these risk terrains are effectively navigated?
Okay, my video needs to be enabled again.
Oh, okay, I'll do that right away.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so you've highlighted the importance of legal due diligence, and this will typically come into play when our clients are looking to invest in a mining asset, either coming in as a joint venture partner or providing equity or debt capital to the company that holds a mining title. So the legal due diligence helps to, beyond just knowing that the assets exist, helps to assess the legal risks that are attached to the asset, because you want to be sure that there's certainty around the title. You want to be sure that the compliance history is clean, and there are no significant risks that will come, or liabilities that will come up after the transaction. So in conducting the due diligence, I think one key element is the verification of the title. And so lawyers can support their clients in approaching the MCO to confirm that the mineral title is in good standing. The MCO would respond highlighting the validity of the title, when it was granted, when it expires, what mineral it covers, the coordinates of the title, which is very important. And so the coordinates is the geographical coordinates are those numbers that allows you to identify the exact location on the map where that mineral title is located. Ideally, because the MCO operates a digital platform, there are not supposed to be any overlaps. But I guess in the transition from when it was still manual to when it was operating, some overlaps may have occurred, and that will require more boots on the ground, right? If it's not showing up on the MCO system that there is indeed a title there is indeed coordinates that overlap with that title. And then beyond checking that the title is in good standing, it's also important to confirm whether there are any encumbrances on the title, like mortgages or charges. If the title has been pledged for a loan by another entity, you go into the CAC records of the holder of that title to confirm the corporate standing and confirm whether there are any charges that exist in respect of either the shares of the company or no, not the shares, in respect of the mineral title itself, or any equipment that the company is seeking to use. The also important is requesting a review of the contractual arrangements that the title holder has entered into. So you want to be sure that there are no existing third-party rights. They've not committed that title under a different joint venture structure, or they are not under some sort of exclusivity agreement that binds them, that restricts them from dealing with another person. You want to be sure that there are no litigation or disputes that affect that title, and also whether the operator has obtained the required documentation in respect to access to the surface of the land. So the mineral title gives you access to the minerals under the ground, but there's also, if it's a mining lease, you also want to be sure that there's documentation confirming that appropriate compensation has been paid, surface rental agreement has been concluded, and there's clear visibility as to the proper landowner's consents. We've talked about the community development agreement. Mr. Daudu mentioned that I mean, all those compliance checks pretty much are in place. So those are the things you would look into in a nutshell on the due diligence. So in terms of structuring the transaction itself, when you've now conducted a due diligence and highlight what the risks are, and you see how some of those risks can be mitigated in the documentation through your representations and warranties that you put in there, through the indemnity provisions in the document, through maybe conditions precedents to the transaction, such that, okay, we saw that this hasn't been done, we saw that this isn't clear. So before the transaction closes, the CP is to ensure that these boxes are ticked before we then move on to closing, and whether there are any conditions that need to be put in place even after any obligations that you need to be mindful of. So the due diligence helps you to identify this risk and see how those can be structured into the transaction documents, ensuring that your client is protected beyond the closing of the transaction. So while it is not just to check, oh, we've done a due diligence, the idea is that from the due diligence, you see where the issues are, you see where the skeletons are buried, and you find mechanisms to either mitigate or limit how those risks will show up in the future, and limit the liabilities that your clients will be exposed to. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been undoubtedly quite an insightful conversation, and for every good thing, there has to be an end. So I just want to give a sense to all of our participants that this session is actually going to end at some point, just to manage your expectations. But please kindly drop your questions in the chat box, just in case you have any of them, and I'll read them out to the speakers. But before I get to that part of the presentation, I'll kindly ask Mr. Shosami to address one very important issue, considering the demographics of our audience, which of course is largely young lawyers. How do you think that young lawyers might be able to develop capacity and position themselves very, in an opportune manner, considering that the industry is developing, I assume that there are opportunities that lie there within. So how do you think that some of us young lawyers can position ourselves for the opportunities within this industry?
Yeah, that's a great question, Fortune. And I mean, I can totally relate with that. One of the ways by which you can achieve that is what is happening right now. Knowledge sharing, building your skills and knowledge through research, through knowledge sharing initiatives, self-development. What do I mean by that? So if you, for instance, practice in a firm that doesn't do anything related to mining, and you have an interest in mining, there's nothing that stops you from picking up the Mining Act and regulations and reading through, understanding the legal framework. There's a lot of knowledge out there through social media platforms, news, virtual news stations and things like that. So just educate yourself. Education. I remember when I also wear another cap apart from mining. I'm also a tax lawyer. And I remember when I started practicing tax, nobody was talking about tax at the time. But I'm a self-taught tax lawyer, and to a large extent, I'm also a self-taught mining lawyer. So honestly, if you have a genuine interest in the area, just educate yourself, and you're fortunate to have networking opportunities through the NBA-SBL platform. Jumoke is doing a fantastic job as the chair of that committee. They often organize knowledge sharing events, and I encourage you, those of you who are interested in mining and energy, because mining is a very integral part of energy now, so to join those knowledge sharing events. Also, as young lawyers, you can also start looking into advocacy as well. You can form advocacy groups. You can try to understand how the National Assembly works, know who the chairman of the Solid Minerals Committee is within the National Assembly, and engage with policymakers, leverage social media to mobilize support for your views and ideas, because there's a lot to unpack, when it comes to mining. Maybe another time we'll have the opportunity to talk about the linkages between mining and energy, and the whole conversation around energy transition, which is what is shaping policies, mining policies around the world. And sometimes I really wonder whether we have connected the dots yet in Nigeria in that regard. So there's so many areas that you can look into when, if you're interested in mining law as a young practitioner. Disputes resolution is another interesting one. You know, when Jumoke was talking about due diligence, I think she also should have mentioned the issue of communities as well. You know, we're seeing that in conducting due diligence now, community issues are increasingly becoming a necessary area to look at how your clients obtain their consent, because you have communities coming forward now to say that, oh, they never give that consent. You have communities who are giving consent with regard to the same coordinates to 2 or 3 different people. And so when your client comes with a mineral title and you think he's certain about his coordinates, you'll just be surprised that you know, someone else has the exact same coordinates against which he's been issued or granted the license by the community. So there's so many areas that you can. Finally, I'll talk about pro bono as well. That's one of the fastest ways to grow as a lawyer. You know, you can offer pro bono services to advocacy groups. So there's an international organization that is Global Impact Lawyers, right? Global Impact, Association of Global Impact Lawyers. You may want to check that out. You can join as an individual, or you can encourage your firm to join. It offers opportunities to young lawyers who are interested in mining or energy law.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shosami. I would also be grateful if maybe Mrs. Fajamiroko could also share some of our insights around how, you know, young lawyers might be able to capitalize on the opportunities within the industry. Just, you know, very briefly, we are now very conscious of time, so we will only be able to take as much as 3 questions. I see there's quite a number of questions in the chat box, but Mrs. Fajamiroko, please.
Yeah, I think Mrs. Ososhami has covered the field, and there's not really much to add except to just emphasize that you look out for events organized by the NBSBL Mining Law Committee. We're planning a training in the coming months, so just be on the lookout for that. Keeping yourself abreast with understanding the legal framework is key. Getting into knowledge events is very key. Keeping up with developments in the sector, with the news, knowing the operators, knowing keeping up to abreast with policy changes and where new things are happening is very key. So just basically being hungry for knowledge, I think it is the tip I'll give. But she's said everything. I'm not sure there's more to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe before I let you go, I would kindly ask that you. So this question, well, I'll just take it, but I think it has much to do with what is required of the government, you know. But I believe that Mrs. Fajamiroko should have some insight. So it says, "Good morning. My name is Mubarak Ahmad. A lot of people would want to tap into the mining and minerals world. However, it is somewhat rumored to be mostly bedeviled by insecurity. What is the truth around that, and what is being put in place to make the space safer?"
Okay. Yeah, I think I guess it's common knowledge that a lot of insecurity is being fueled by access to mineral resources, and so that's a concern, a very big concern. What is being done about that? We've seen more action from the federal government in deploying security operatives to address issues around insecurity. We know that Zamfara State was closed to mining for about 5 years. And so very recently, as a result of the interventions by government, it's been opened back up for mining. So yes, there are concerns around insecurity. Government is doing what it can to address that. We have the mining marshals, the various security operatives that they're putting into place targeted operations. There's also, I think recently I saw news about the ministry investing in surveillance equipment as well to help curb all of these issues. So actions are being taken. It's work in progress. And so hopefully in the coming years, we'll see the incidences of insecurity reduce. That's all I can say because I'm not I'm not government.
You're not the government, neither are you the ICP. So it's very much understandable. Thank you very much, ma'am. So our next question would go to Mr. Daudu, and it's along the lines of the response you provided regarding the overlap between federal and state government obligations. And this is from Oreva Isaac Oibojabo. It says it is very clear by the tenure of the Land Use Act that lands in the state are vested in the governor of the state, and also that mineral resources are vested in the federal government. But what is the essence of the freedom to operate agreement between the company and host communities where license has already been granted? I want to assume that this speaks to CDAs, but Mr. Daudu, please.
Sorry, I don't think I.
Okay. So I think.
Okay, I don't think I understand the question properly. As in, yes, the Constitution has given the mineral rights in any land to the federal government. The Land Use Act, which is in a way, in line with certain interpretations, a part of the Constitution, gives the governors part, as in over land within their respective domain. Now, because, and if you look at the, I think that's section 1(2) or 1(3) of the mineral, 1(2) of the Mines and the Minerals and Mining Act, as in, it actually enjoins the federal government to ensure that where lands have been, where minerals are found in commercial quantity, shall from the commencement of that act be acquired by the federal government. The federal government cannot solely acquire land; they have to work with the state government. So it behoves on the state government, the federal government, to work with the state government to ensure that land where any such mineral are found, as in becomes acquired and is now with the federal government. And it is on that basis that the federal government issues licenses to whoever they want to issue it to. Some people may look at it as an area of overlap, but if indeed it's really, I don't think we will be hearing as in comments about resource control again. This is an area where state government have been saying, okay, or some people have been championing the issue about resource control. It is the same thing that played out in the oil and gas industry. It is the same thing that is here. So it's not so much of an overlap. It's just states or the subnational wanting more, as in wanting to take control of what is in their domain. I don't know if that answers the question.
So hopefully it does. I think that's a good way to approach it.
Exactly. I don't. Okay, maybe Jonathan wants to say.
I just wanted to just touch on the freedom to operate part of the question.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that what I understand is that for oil and gas communities, oil and gas operations, there's been that practice where the operator wants to carry out some works, right? They then have to pay or enter into an agreement with the host community, which they call the freedom to operate, and they pay some money, and it's sort of like a permission to go in and do the works that you want to do. And so that is not a statutory arrangement. It's just a practice that had developed in the oil and gas industry, which I believe is overtaken by the establishment of the Host Community Development Trust that the Petroleum Industry Act mandates. So it's not and it's not a practice that I've heard of happen within the mining industry. What the mining industry provides for, as Mr. Dowdo had enumerated, is the community development agreement, which provides for how the benefits of the mining operation will be, the social and economic benefits of the mining operation will be translated to the host community.
Thank you so much. So our intention was to keep this webinar under 130 minutes, but you'd agree with me that with the way the conversations were progressing, that was going to be a very difficult task. So I apologize for letting this linger beyond the required time frame. But I'll just take one last question, and this would go to Mr. Fagule. It's just a simple one. It says, beyond oil, is mining Nigeria's next frontier?
Thank you. Good question. I think that it is one of the next frontiers. Unfortunately, I don't think that there is any one next frontier for Nigeria. We have to accomplish many different things simultaneously. So human capital development, I think, is the most important next frontier. I think the creative industries are a major next frontier that we have to add strength to what is already happening there. Technology is a very important next frontier. And mining is also there. Within oil and gas itself, oil and gas itself, there are still opportunities. Gas is an important area. Domestic utilization of gas for energy production and consumption locally, as well as the export of liquefied natural gas. So there are multiple next frontiers, and we have to attack all of them simultaneously, given the scale of the development challenge that we're facing in Nigeria. But mining absolutely is one of them. I think that you've had a very good opportunity with this webinar to really understand from actual practitioners how complex an industry it is, and what are the various things that are affecting the progress or slowing down progress within the mining industry. But there are lots of opportunities there regardless. And for a lawyer who chooses to focus on that area, there definitely is a lot of opportunities to be successful there. So it's one of the next frontiers, but nonetheless, it is very important, and it's not a bad area to focus on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you so much to all of our fantastic speakers who have, done justice to the respective questions that they have been asked. I believe that apologies for that. I believe that this has been a very, very wonderful What the While session, and it's not really easy to have people of this caliber take out 2 hours of their time on a Friday, to speak to young lawyers. So we are really, really grateful, very appreciative, and we hope that all the insights you have shared, we're able to put them into good use, whether for those of us that are within the finance industry, mining industry, or the energy spectrum in general, and anyone who has an interest in delving into this space. I will quickly call on the chairman of the NBA-YLF Energy and Sustainability Committee to do us the honors of just sharing a few last words before we call it a day. It's been such a pleasure hosting this session. Once again, my name is Fortuny Hato, and thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? So I'm having a bit of a challenge with the audio.
You're good to go.
Fortune, please let me know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
All right. So just to go right ahead and say thank you, Mr. Fola, you talk about human capital development, and it enables us more to push what we're doing. The mining sector is very critical. The entire wave of the renewable energy space today is powered by the mining sector. You talk about lithium for batteries and all of the several minerals that are very necessary if we're going to even have an energy transition conversation. So just to say to all our speakers that we are very grateful that you've come to help us power this conversation. But to only say that we need to have more of these engagements, and as much as possible, we need to have them more frequently than none. I always like to give the illustration that is an ecosystem that has very limited opportunities for people to participate. The law firms, how many can they employ? Even the AFC, I don't know how many they can employ. There's a dearth of there's several limitations with how many persons are opportune to have being law firms or being organizations that have mining practices or able to build a career. So a lot of people are essentially left to just work on self-development. So platforms like this, the Young Leaders Forum, is always an opportunity to connect and give back more. So we're very grateful that you have brought your resource capacity. We're asking you to please come and help us do much more. Mrs. Fajem, we're open to partnering with the mining committee of the NBA-YLF. We have an entire working group that is focused on mining, metals, extractives, and we just want to spread knowledge as much as possible. There shouldn't be a dearth of professionals. So it feels like you have an industry that the talent potential is concentrated in just a very few set of persons, and we're trying to essentially democratize it. So you can help us in many ways. I'm speaking to all the organizations who are here, and come and be a part of our process. You can support us. I mentioned some of the things that we're pushing. This session, for example, will be documented in a report that will come out in our second quarter bulletin. Our first quarter bulletin will be released next week. Organizations can come and support the process for that. Take out, sponsor a page, and see how help support the mission to ensure that we spread the knowledge base to much more than what we currently have. And you must bear in mind that it's not just the young professionals community, it's the student community. We're partnering with energy clubs across different schools. We just want to start building that talent pipeline so that young persons can have the opportunity to participate, to not only participate, but to help shape the industry. It's a beautiful future for everybody. And just to wrap up on that and to say thank you to everybody who came from the NBA-YLF Governing Council, from my committee, from the NBA at the National. Thank you, Mr. Fola, Mr. Kende, Mrs. Fajem Mirokun, and Mrs. Lola Deososami. I think it's a convenient point to call the meeting to a close.
Thank you very much. Take care.
All right, thanks, and have the best of the weekend, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.